September 2025. Instead of easing into the quiet end of monsoon season, Arizona was thrown into one of its worst flooding disasters in decades. In Gila County, the desert towns of Globe, Miami, and Claypool were blindsided as back-to-back storms unleashed torrents of rain, more than 2 inches falling in just a few hours. For a region built on dry valleys and dusty washes, it was too much too fast. Streets became violent rivers, swallowing cars, tearing open storefronts, and pushing walls of debris through historic downtowns. Families scrambled to higher ground, with nothing but what they could carry, as the roar of floodwaters drowned out sirens and shattered the fragile sense of safety. On U.S. Highway 60, Arizona's central artery scenes of devastation stretched for miles. Vehicles lay half-buried in mud, propane tanks bobbed in the current, and rescue crews struggled to reach survivors cut off by collapsed bridges. With at least 3 lives lost, power knocked out across entire neighborhoods, and hundreds displaced, the flood wasn't just another storm. It was a fight for survival in Arizona's desert heartland. The disaster struck Arizona's desert heartland with terrifying speed. On Thursday evening, storms built over the mountains east of Globe and unleashed torrents of rain. In just 90 minutes, more than 2 inches fell, an extraordinary amount for a region where parched washes and shallow drainage systems can't keep pace. Within minutes, neighborhoods were under siege. By midnight, floodwaters surged through the streets, rising past car bumpers and slamming into homes with the force of a freight train. Entire blocks transformed into rivers, sweeping away vehicles, dumpsters, and propane tanks. One resident recalled in shock, "We saw tanks floating by, hissing gas into the air. It was like watching bombs drift downstream." Downtown Globe was hit especially hard. The Wild Horses Saloon lost its entire outer wall, ripped clean away by the sudden pressure of water. Schools, businesses, and even the local Walmart vanished under a thick layer of mud. Families scrambled to second floors and rooftops, clutching children and pets, waving flashlights and sheets into the darkness as floodwaters tore away their belongings. By sunrise, U.S. Highway 60, the lifeline of Gila County, had collapsed in multiple sections, forcing a full shutdown. Emergency managers warned that conditions were still unstable and pleaded with residents to stay off the roads. For Globe, Miami, and Claypool, this was only the beginning of a crisis still unfolding. As dawn broke over Gila County, the scale of the disaster came into sharp, heartbreaking focus. At least 3 lives were confirmed lost, and rescue teams were still scouring flooded washes for the missing. Families huddled on rooftops and second-story balconies, waving frantically as boats and helicopters battled debris-choked waters to reach them. The most chilling danger wasn't just the water. It was the estimated 1,000 propane tanks ripped loose from homes and businesses. Many bobbed through the current, venting gas with a sinister hiss. Fire officials called it a hazmat nightmare, layered on top of a catastrophic flood. One spark could turn this whole valley into an inferno, one responder warned. Residents were told to evacuate immediately at the first whiff of gas. The destruction across Globe was staggering. Streets vanished under a suffocating coat of mud, cars were jammed like toy blocks against bridge supports, and downtown's proud historic buildings sat broken and hollow. The iconic Wild Horses Saloon, a gathering place for generations, was reduced to rubble. Its brick wall collapsed into the street. On U.S. Highway 60, rescuers found vehicles half submerged, pinned between uprooted logs and leaking propane tanks. The critical artery remained shut down in both directions, severing Globe Miami and Claypool from the outside world. Power outages spread, cell towers failed, and communication faltered. For residents, the message was inescapable. This was not just another flood. It was the worst disaster their desert towns had ever endured. By Friday afternoon, Gila County had shifted into full-scale emergency mode. The mayor of Globe declared a state of emergency, unlocking state and federal aid as more than 300 responders. Firefighters, sheriff's deputies, paramedics, and DPS helicopters were deployed into the disaster zone. Shelters sprang to life in schools, churches, and community centers. Families stumbled in, drenched and exhausted, clutching little more than plastic bags stuffed with salvaged belongings. Volunteers worked shoulder to shoulder, distributing bottled water, blankets, and hot meals, while local hospitals braced for a surge of patients suffering from hypothermia, lacerations, and shock. Cleanup crews moved just as urgently. Streets were cleared inch by inch of debris, mud, and propane tanks still hissing from ruptured valves. At Miami High School, the gymnasium, once filled with pep rallies and basketball games, was converted into a sprawling shelter, fortified with sandbags. Rows of cots and classrooms turned into triage centers. Teachers, parents, and neighbors became instant relief workers, handing out supplies and comforting terrified children. Yet the nightmare wasn't over. Forecasters warned of more storms looming in the coming hours, raising the risk of fresh flash floods and landslides across the already saturated terrain. Officials urged residents to stack sandbags, avoid travel, and remain tuned to emergency alerts. Amid the chaos, one truth became inescapable. Globe, Miami, and Claypool would need every ounce of grit and resilience to weather not just this flood, but the uncertain days ahead. By Saturday morning, the floods in Globe, Arizona had exploded onto national headlines. Dramatic images of cars tumbling down washes like toy trucks, families waving frantically from rooftops, and propane tanks erupting in bursts of flame dominated TV screens and social media feeds coast to coast. Overnight hashtags tied to Arizona floods trended across platforms with videos of hissing tanks and rivers of debris, shocking viewers far beyond the desert Southwest. News networks quickly drew comparisons to Hurricane Harvey's flash floods and Louisiana's 2016 deluge, calling this one of the most severe inland flooding disasters in Arizona's modern history. Analysts emphasized how unprepared desert communities remain for back-to-back storms of such magnitude. In Washington, the political response was immediate. FEMA teams fanned out across Gila County to evaluate damage for a potential federal disaster declaration, while the National Guard was placed on standby. Lawmakers seized on the event as another stark example of extreme weather intensified by a warming climate, renewing calls for urgent investment in resilient infrastructure and stronger flood defenses. For residents, however, the crisis felt painfully close and personal. "We've lost homes, cars, memories, but not hope," one Globe teacher told reporters as she stood outside a mud-soaked classroom. Across Globe, Miami, and Claypool, survivors pleaded for help not in months, but in hours. This wasn't just Arizona's disaster. It was a wake-up call to millions of Americans. If extreme floods can rip through the desert, then nowhere is truly safe. As the floodwaters finally began to recede, the staggering scale of devastation in Gila County came into focus. Early assessments put the losses in the tens of millions, with destruction stretching from collapsed bridges to gutted neighborhoods. The closure of U.S. Highway 60, the region's main artery for commerce, brought the economy to a standstill. Truck shipments where stranded shelves in grocery stores went bare, and gas stations miles away reported long lines as fuel deliveries stalled. For families, the impact was even more personal. Homes reduced to shells cars, left in twisted heaps, and treasured belongings swept away in the span of a single night. Community landmarks lay crippled. The local Walmart sat waterlogged Miami High School's gymnasium was coated in mud, and Globe's historic downtown was left in ruin. Small shop owners stood silently in the wreckage, surveying shelves warped by water and cash registers caked in sludge. It's not just money, one owner told reporters. This was my family's life's work gone. Infrastructure failures deepened the crisis. Power grid repairs could take weeks, leaving thousands in the dark. Water treatment plants were offline, raising fears of contamination and disease. Insurance adjusters poured in, but many residents admitted they had no flood coverage, a harsh reality in desert states where such disasters are rarely anticipated. For Globe Miami and Claypool, the path forward was clear, but daunting. Recovery would take months, perhaps years, and the scars left behind would reshape these communities forever. Even as floodwaters swallowed streets and homes, the people of Globe and Miami showed a resilience no storm could wash away. Neighbors linked arms to pull the stranded from rooftops, while volunteers delivered food blankets and sandbags. Churches and schools turned into shelters, offering dry ground and comfort to families who had lost everything in a single night. Teachers shoveled mud from classrooms, determined to bring children back to some sense of normalcy. First responders worked around the clock, wading through chest-deep water and climbing onto rooftops to ensure no one was left behind. Exhausted but relentless, they became the heartbeat of a community fighting to survive. But beyond the courage, the message was stark. This flood was not an isolated disaster. It was a preview of the future. Climate extremes are striking faster and harder across America, overwhelming infrastructure and shattering the illusion that deserts are safe from water's fury. For Globe, the road to recovery will take months, even years. Yet their struggle delivers a clear warning to us all. Resilience cannot start after disaster strikes. Preparation is no longer optional. It is the only way forward in a world where storms like this are becoming the new normal. The floodwaters in Arizona's desert heart will eventually drain away, but the scars will remain etched into broken homes, shuttered schools, and the memories of families who lost everything. This was more than a local disaster. It was a warning to America that no place, not even the driest deserts, is safe from the accelerating chaos of extreme weather. From the Gulf Coast to the Midwest, and now into the Southwest, the message is undeniable. The map of danger is changing. Yet even in the face of destruction, one truth endures resilience. In Globe and Miami, neighbors formed human chains to rescue the stranded. Churches opened their doors to the displaced, and first responders risked their lives through chest-deep water. Their courage is proof that while storms may be unstoppable, solidarity can be stronger. But their story cannot end here. It falls on us, viewers, neighbors, citizens, to carry it forward. Stay prepared. Support relief efforts. Share these lessons before the next storm arrives. And if you believe coverage like this matters, don't just watch, take action. Like, subscribe, and share this channel. Together, we can build awareness, strengthen resilience, and ensure no community faces disaster alone.